The watchers of Cedar Falls, I never believed in evil until it moved into my daughter's bedroom. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and 6 months ago I thought I had figured out all of life's secrets. At 28, recently married to David after a 4-year courtship that survived college, job changes, and even a brief period of long-distance dating when he worked in Seattle. We had our perfect daughter Emma, the result of a previous marriage. That ended when my ex-husband Michael decided that being a father didn't fit into his plans to find himself. Through a spiritual journey through Asia, David adopted Emma when we got married, and she had been calling him Daddy since she was 2. Our life in Boston was comfortable, predictable, and safe. David worked as a software engineer for a promising startup. I taught high school English, and Emma attended a lovely daycare 3 blocks from our house. We had routines, family traditions, and plans for the future. Sunday dinners at David's parents' house, picnics on the common on weekends, annual vacations to Cape Cod where we rented the same beachfront cabin every summer. Then David got the promotion. Manager of software development, with a 40% salary increase, but requiring constant travel to clients on the West Coast. Initially, we rejected the offer. Our life was working perfectly. Why fix what isn't broken? But the company insisted. They offered a generous relocation package, help finding a new house, even assistance for me to get a teaching position at a local school. And David, ever the pragmatic one, did the math. Sarah, with this salary, we can finally buy a real house. A house of our own with a yard for Emma to play in. Maybe even a pool someday. And if I accept now, in 5 years, I'll be in a position to take over regional management. I still had reservations, but David had that sparkle in his eyes that appeared when he saw an opportunity. And I admit, the idea of having our own house, instead of paying rent for the rest of our lives, was tempting. That's how we found ourselves driving across Massachusetts on a cold March morning, following the GPS instructions to a town called Cedar Falls, 50 kilometers west of Boston, population 12,000, known for its autumn foliage and well-preserved Victorian architecture. The real estate agent Janet Whitmore met us at the entrance to town at a Starbucks that seemed incongruous among the historic red brick buildings. She was a woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit, with a smile that looked like it had been practiced in front of a mirror. "You are going to love Cedar Falls," she said as she guided us through the tree-lined streets. "It's exactly the kind of place where young families put down roots. Excellent schools, virtually non-existent crime, and property values that only go up." She showed us 6 houses that day. 3 were too small, 2 were beyond our budget, and 1 was on a busy street that made me nervous thinking about Emma playing in the yard. I was starting to think we would have to make several trips before finding something suitable when Janet suggested one more stop. "I know you're tired," she said, "but there's a property that just hit the market. The price is a little lower than you would expect for a house this size and location, but I'm sure it's exactly what you're looking for." The house at 1247 Elm Street was truly impressive. A 2-story Victorian painted grayish blue with white trim, surrounded by mature oak trees that must have been over 100 years old. The front yard was well maintained, with tulip beds that were starting to sprout, promising vibrant spring colors. A low wrought iron fence bordered the property, and a stone path led to a wraparound porch decorated with hanging planters. Built in 1924, Janet explained, as she unlocked the front door with an antique brass key. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, fireplace in the living room, kitchen renovated 3 years ago. And look at this high ceiling. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. Original hardwood floors polished to a shine, ornate molding around every door and window, a curved staircase that gracefully ascended to the 2nd floor. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, creating golden patterns on the living room floor. Emma immediately ran to the staircase, her small hands gliding along the polished banister. "Can I have the upstairs room, Mommy?" "The one with the big window." Janet guided us through the house, pointing out architectural details, explaining recent improvements, mentioning the efficiency of the heating system. But I was barely listening. There was something about the house that made me uncomfortable, although I couldn't pinpoint exactly what. Maybe it was the way our voices echoed in the empty rooms, or how the shadows seemed darker than they should be on a sunny afternoon. Maybe it was the temperature. Even with the heat on, certain corners of the house remained inexplicably cold. Or maybe it was the room Emma had chosen. It was at the back of the house on the second floor, with a large bay window that offered a view of the backyard. It was a lovely room, with delicate floral wallpaper and a built-in closet that Emma declared perfect for her dolls. But something about that room bothered me. How long has the house been empty? I asked Janet while Emma explored every corner of what she already considered her new domain. For a moment, Janet's professional smile wavered. "A few months," she said. "The previous owners moved suddenly. Job opportunity in California. You know how the tech market is. When a chance comes up, it has to be now or never. And before that? Any other recent owners?" Janet consulted her folder, but I could see she already knew the information by heart. Let's see. The Johnsons lived here for 6 months in 2019. Before them, the Martinez for about 4 months. The house has had some short-term owners in recent years, but that's common in today's market. People move more often, especially young professionals. There was something about the way she spoke, too fast with too many details, that gave me the impression she was rehearsing. David, on the other hand, was completely charmed. He measured the rooms, tested the faucets, examined the basement for signs of structural problems. His engineering background made him naturally meticulous about that kind of thing. "The structure is perfect," he told me while Janet showed Emma how to open the window of her future bedroom. "Updated electrical system, new plumbing, roof replaced 2 years ago. Sarah, it's an incredible deal." The price was genuinely attractive, $40,000 below market value for comparable homes in the area. When I mentioned it to Janet, she explained that the previous owners were eager to sell quickly. "Sometimes life just happens," she said. "Unexpected changes, opportunities that can't wait. For you, it's a chance to get an incredible house at a fair price." I should have asked more questions. I should have insisted on meeting the neighbors before signing anything. I should have trusted that inexplicable cold I felt in my stomach every time I looked at Emma's bedroom window. But David was beaming at the possibility. Emma was already planning where she would put her bed, and the practical side of me was calculating how much money we would save on mortgage payments compared to our rent in Boston. We signed the papers. 3 days later, the move happened on a rainy Friday at the end of March. The Mordecai movers we hired were efficient but nervous, constantly checking their watches and making jokes about haunted houses. Initially, I thought they were kidding about the house's age and Gothic appearance, but then I heard one of them mutter to another, "At least it's during the day. I wouldn't want to be here after dark." When I asked him what he meant, the man, a robust fellow in his 40s with tattoos covering his arms, just shook his head. "Nothing much, ma'am. It's just that, well, this house has a reputation in town, but I'm sure they're just stories people tell." "What kind of stories?" He hesitated, looking at his colleagues who continued to move our things. "Look, it's probably nothing, but people say that families don't stay here very long. And when they leave, it's usually in the middle of the night, leaving most of their stuff behind." A chill ran down my spine, but David appeared at that moment carrying a box of books, and the topic was lost in the chaos of the move. Our first neighbors came to greet us on Saturday morning. Margaret Henderson, a lady in her 70s with grey hair tied in a tight bun, showed up at our door with a still warm apple pie. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, but there was something strained about her smile. "I hope you are happy here." The pause before happy was subtle but noticeable. Mrs. Henderson lived 2 houses down, in a yellow colonial with a meticulously maintained garden. She told us she had lived in Cedar Falls for 40 years, ever since she got married and moved from her hometown upstate. "I've seen many families come and go in this house," she said, waving vaguely toward our property. "I always hope that this time will be different." "Why would it be different?" I asked. Another moment of hesitation. "Oh, just changes are difficult, aren't they? Especially for families with young children. Sometimes it takes time to get used to a new house." Emma was playing in the backyard, pushing her tricycle along the stone path. Mrs. Henderson watched her with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, part affection, part worry. "How old is your daughter?" 3, 4 next month." "Lovely age. So innocent, so pure." She said that last word almost in a whisper. "You must take care of her. Careful. Oh, you know. Small children have such active imaginations. Small children have such active imaginations." Sometimes they see things that, well, that adults don't see. It's important not to completely dismiss their concerns, but also not to let childish fears become real problems. It was strange advice, too specific to be casual. But before I could ask more, David appeared to call me to help with some boxes, and Mrs. Henderson quickly said goodbye. That night, we had our first meal in the new kitchen. Delivered pizza on paper plates, sitting on plastic chairs because we hadn't unpacked the dining table yet. Emma was excited, chattering about her new room, the different sounds of the house, the birds she could see from her window. "And there's a man in the backyard," she said casually as she chewed a piece of pizza. David and I exchanged glances. "What man, sweetie?" I asked. "The tall man. He stands under the big tree and looks at my window. He doesn't have a face, but he waved at me. The blood in my veins turned to ice, but David laughed. Emma has an incredible imagination," he said. "Remember when she was sure there was a dragon living in our closet in Boston?" "But I saw the dragon," Emma protested. "And I see the tall man, too. He's there now." I looked out the kitchen window, which overlooked the backyard. The last lights of twilight still provided good visibility, but there was no one out there. "Where, darling?" Emma stood up from her chair and pointed to the old oak tree in the center of the backyard. "Right there. He's waving again." David and I looked where she was pointing. Nothing but tree and grass. "Maybe it's just the shadows of the branches moving in the wind," David suggested. Emma shook her head emphatically. "It's not shadows. It's a man. A very skinny man with no face. And he knows my name." "He... what?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "He said, 'Hi, Emma,' when I looked out the window earlier. But Daddy was in the shower and you were on the phone with Grandma, so I didn't tell anyone." David got up and turned on the outdoor light that illuminated the backyard. The sudden brightness revealed every corner of the space. Grass that needed to be mowed. Some gardening tools left by the previous owners. The rope swing hanging from the lowest branch of the oak tree. Nothing else. See? There's no one there, Emma. Sometimes our mind plays tricks on us, especially when we're in a new place. Emma frowned, clearly frustrated at not being believed. "But I saw him. He was right there." "Maybe you did see him," I said carefully. "But sometimes the people we see in new places are just echoes, memories of the place. Like when you dream about people you don't really know." I don't know why I said that. The words left my mouth before I had time to think about them. David looked at me strangely. "Echoes? I mean, that old houses sometimes make our imagination work harder, especially for children." But Emma had lost interest in the conversation, turning her attention back to the pizza. David and I finished eating in relative silence, both occasionally glancing out the window. After dinner, while David set up Emma's bed and I organized her clothes, I found a small diary that she had received from her daycare teacher as a farewell gift. Emma didn't know how to write yet, but she liked to draw and ask adults to write down her stories. The last entry in the diary, dated 2 days before our move, said, "I will miss Boston, but I'm excited to meet the tall man who lives in my new house." My hands trembled as I held the notebook. "Emma!" I called. She ran into the room, her blonde hair flying behind her. "What is this about the tall man in your new house?" She looked at the diary as if it were obvious. "I dreamed about him. The night after we visited the house, he told me he had been waiting for me for a long time and that he would finally have a friend to play with. What else did he say? That he knew a lot of children before me, but they all left. He said he hoped I would stay longer." I closed the diary harder than necessary, trying to keep my voice calm. "Emma, I want you to always tell me when you have dreams about the tall man, okay? Or if you see him while you're awake, even if it seems silly or scary." She agreed, then got distracted by the prospect of sleeping in her new bed for the first time. David finished setting up the furniture around 10 o'clock at night. Emma had fallen asleep during a story, exhausted by the busy day of unpacking and exploring. We settled into our own new bed, surrounded by boxes that still needed to be opened and pictures waiting to be hung. "Interesting day," David murmured, pulling me close. "What did you think about what Emma said about the tall man?" "Honestly, I think it's completely normal. New house, new environment, a lot of change all at once. Her mind is processing everything through what she knows best, stories and imagination." It made sense. David was always the more rational of us, balancing my tendency to worry too much. "You're right about the echoes too," he continued. "Old houses carry energy from the people who lived in them. Not supernatural energy, he added quickly, but you know, emotional history. Emma is sensitive. She might be picking up residual bits from the families who lived here before. It was a comforting and logical explanation. I snuggled closer to David and tried to relax. But around 2 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Small, hesitant footsteps. Emma. I got up silently and opened the bedroom door. The hallway was dark, but I could see Emma's small silhouette standing in front of the window at the end of the hall, the one that overlooked the backyard. Emma, what are you doing awake, sweetie? She turned slowly. Even in the darkness, I could see that her eyes were wide open, alert. The tall man is downstairs. He's calling me. My heart raced, but I kept my voice calm. Calling how? He's saying my name and gesturing for me to come down. I approached the window and looked into the backyard. The moonlight provided enough light to see clearly. The oak tree, the swing moving gently in the night breeze, the back fence that separated our property from the woods beyond. Nothing else. Emma, there's no one there. She pointed to the base of the oak tree. He's right there. Look, he's waving at you too now. I looked again, forcing my eyes to fully adjust to the darkness. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw something. A shadow darker than the others, tall and strange. But then a cloud passed over the moon, and when the light returned, there was nothing but the tree. Come on, let's go back to bed, I said, reaching out for Emma's hand. But he'll be sad if I don't go talk to him. Emma, I used my mother's no-arguments tone. We don't leave the house in the middle of the night to talk to strangers, even strangers that only you can see. She sighed, but took my hand. I led her back to her room and tucked her in with her favorite blankets, a pink set with unicorns we had brought from Boston. Mommy, why can't you and Daddy see the tall man? It was a fair question, and it deserved an honest answer. I don't know, sweetie. Maybe some people see things that others don't. Or maybe you're daydreaming because you're tired and everything is new. But I'm not dreaming. He's real, and he looks lonely. Lonely? He told me he's been alone for a very, very long time. Since the other children left. My skin crawled. What other children? But Emma was already falling asleep, her breathing becoming deeper and more regular. I sat by her bed for another hour, watching, listening. The house made the normal sounds of an old structure. Wood expanding and contracting, pipes rattling, wind whistling through small cracks. Nothing else. When I finally returned to my bed, David was awake. Everything all right? Emma was sleepwalking. Or at least I think she was. Has she done that before? Never. He pulled me close again. Changes are hard for kids. It will pass. I wanted to believe him. I desperately wanted to believe that all of this was normal, explainable, temporary. But as I tried to fall back asleep, I couldn't stop thinking about Emma's words. Since the other children left. How many other children had lived in this house? And why did they all leave? The next week passed in a fog of routines. David started his new job. I started looking for teaching positions at local schools. Emma enrolled in a daycare 10 minutes from home. We were too busy unpacking, getting to know the area, and establishing new routines to think much about tall men or mysterious children. Emma adjusted to the new daycare surprisingly well. Her teacher, Miss Patricia, was a kind woman in her 50s who had worked with children for over 20 years. She reassured me that Emma was integrating well with the other children and participating in all the activities. She has a wonderful imagination, Miss Patricia told me when I picked her up on Friday. Today she told the whole class about her special friend who lives in the tree in her backyard. Special friend. Apparently he's very tall and has no face, but he's kind to her. She drew a portrait of him during free time. Would you like to see? Miss Patricia showed me Emma's drawing, done with crayons on manila paper. It was a typical representation for a 3-year-old, a disproportionately long stick figure with no facial features, standing under what was clearly a large tree. But there was something about the drawing that bothered me. The figure was much more detailed than Emma's usual drawings. She had carefully worked on the long fingers and the arms that seemed to stretch beyond what would be natural. And although there was no face, there was something about the angle of the head that suggested it was looking directly out of the paper. The angle of the head that suggested it was looking directly out of the paper. Emma said her friend tells stories about other children who used to live in her house, Miss Patricia continued. Stories about how they played together before they left. She said other children lived in our house. Oh yes, she seems to know a lot of details. Names, ages, even some of the games they played. It's amazing how a child's mind can develop complex narratives. I took Emma home that afternoon with a growing sense of unease. During dinner, I casually asked about her special friend. What's his name, Emma? He said I can call him Arthur. But that's not his real name. David and I exchanged glances. What is his real name? David asked. Emma hesitated, as if trying to remember something complicated. He said he used to be called Arthur when he was little like me. But now he's different, so he needs a different name. Different how? Bigger, older, sadder, she thought for a moment. And angrier too. Angry about what? About the children who left without saying goodbye to him. That night after Emma fell asleep, I searched online for the history of our house. I didn't find much. Some property records showing the various transfers of ownership over the years, some old photos on Cedar Falls historical heritage websites. But I didn't find any information about specific families who had lived there, or why so many people had stayed for such short periods. David suggested I go to the town library on Saturday. Local librarians are gold mines for that kind of information, he said, especially in small towns like this. The Cedar Falls Public Library was in a converted Victorian house downtown, with dark wood shelves and the comforting smell of old books. The head librarian, Dorothy Carmichael, was a woman in her 60s with grey hair and glasses hanging from a chain. She recognized our address immediately when I mentioned it. "Ah, you bought the Blackwood house," she said, her expression turning serious. I hope you'll be happy there." It was the same hesitant pause I had noticed in Mrs. Henderson. "Mrs. Carmichael, may I ask about the history of the house? It seems there have been many owners over the years, and I'm curious." She looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing how much to tell me. "Come with me," she finally said. "We have a historical archives section that might interest you." Dorothy took me to a smaller room at the back of the library, lined with old files and boxes. She pulled out a thick folder labeled 1247 Elm Street and placed it on a reading table. "Sit down," she said. "This might be a long conversation." The folder contained decades of newspaper clippings, property records, and even some old photographs. Dorothy arranged the documents chronologically on the table in front of me. "The house was built in 1924 by a man named William Hartwell," she began. "He was a local businessman, owner of a thriving sawmill. He lived there with his wife and 3 children until 1954, when they moved to Florida for retirement." She showed me a photograph of the Hartwell family posing on the front porch. A robust middle-aged man, an elegant woman in a 1940s dress, and 3 smiling children. After the Hartwells, the house was sold to a young family, the Morrisons. They had 2 small children. Dorothy pointed to another set of documents. "But the strange thing is that the Morrisons moved out after only 8 months. They sold quickly for much less than they had paid. Why? It was never publicly explained. But there are rumors." She hesitated. "Please continue." "Well, the Morrisons' young daughter, she was only 4 years old, started having terrible nightmares. She would scream during the night about a dark man who came to her room. The parents took her to doctors, psychologists, even a priest for a blessing. Nothing helped, my skin crawled. And after the Morrisons?" Dorothy continued through the records. "The Pattersons lasted 6 months in 1956. The Wilsons, 4 months in 1958. The Chens managed to stay a whole year, from 1960 to 1961. But when they left, the wife had to be hospitalized for nervous exhaustion. She showed me more photos, more newspaper clippings. Always the same story. Young families moving in full of hope, then leaving abruptly, usually in the middle of the night. But the strangest thing," Dorothy continued, "was the Blackwood family." She pulled out a separate section of files, this one marked with a red stripe. Confidential police records. The Blackwoods moved into the house in 1985. Thomas and Margaret Blackwood, with their 6-year-old son, Arthur. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. "Arthur," I whispered. Dorothy nodded gravely. "I see you recognize the name." "My daughter." She said she has a friend named Arthur. A tall man with no face who stands under the tree in the backyard. Dorothy's eyes widened behind her glasses. "Oh my God, it started again." "What started?" "Mrs. Carmichael, please tell me everything." Dorothy looked around the empty room, then closed the door. What I'm going to tell you isn't in any official file, but I was here when it happened. I was young, I had just started working at the library, and I never ever forgot. She sat down heavily in the chair beside me. Thomas Blackwood was not a normal man. He worked the night shift at the textile mill, but that was just a front. His true interests were much darker. Dorothy pulled out a folder of yellowed newspaper clippings. It started with small incidents. Pets disappearing in the neighborhood, children reporting nightmares about a bad man who came to their rooms at night, parents finding their houses with signs of invasion, but nothing stolen. She showed me a clipping from 1986. Series of mysterious break-ins haunts residential neighborhood. Thomas was experimenting, testing limits, seeing how far he could go without getting caught. But was he caught? Eventually. But not before... Dorothy paused, her voice failing. Not before he did terrible things. She pulled out another set of documents. Police reports, testimonies, photographs that made me feel nauseous. Thomas had converted the house's basement into a laboratory for his experiments. He lured children from the neighborhood down there, offering them candy, toys, promising to show them special secrets. My voice came out as a whisper. What did he do to them? Rituals, sacrifices. He believed he could gain supernatural power through the suffering of innocence. There were books everywhere. Occultism, necromancy, demonic summoning. Dorothy showed me police photographs of the basement. Even decades later, the images were disturbing. Strange symbols painted on the walls, a makeshift altar, chains fastened to the ceiling. How many children? Officially, 3 were found dead in the basement when police finally got a search warrant. But there was evidence of many more. And Arthur, his son? Dorothy's expression hardened. Arthur was not just a witness to his father's crimes. He was a participant. Thomas was training him, molding him to continue his work. According to the psychiatric reports, Arthur had been so traumatized and conditioned that he could no longer distinguish between right and wrong. I felt bile rising in my throat. When police finally raided the house in October 1987, they found Thomas in the basement performing another ritual. There were 2 children tied to the altar. One dead, one almost dead. Arthur was there, watching, helping. Dorothy paused to regain her composure. The confrontation was violent. Thomas resisted arrest, screaming about completing the work and opening the gate. He seriously injured 2 officers before being subdued. What happened to him? Taken to the state prison to await trial, but 3 days later he was found dead in his cell. Hanged with a sheet. Suicide? Officially, yes. But the guards reported strange things that night. Sounds coming from his cell. Multiple voices, words in languages they didn't recognize. And the next morning, Dorothy showed me another police photograph. Thomas's cell with symbols painted on the walls in blood. The same symbols he used in the rituals. But there was no way he could have gotten material to draw. And the guards swore the cell was clean when he was put in there. And Arthur, placed in protective custody. Social workers said he was so traumatized he barely spoke. When he did speak, it was about continuing Daddy's work and keeping the gates open. Dorothy pulled out one last file, psychiatric hospital records. Arthur was admitted to Hillbrook State Hospital for intensive treatment. Doctors hoped that with proper therapy, he could be rehabilitated. Hoped? Arthur died at the hospital 6 months later. Officially, it was heart failure, but another set of documents, medical reports that made little sense. The nurses reported strange phenomena around Arthur medical equipment, failing without explanation. Other, patients having nightmares about a dark boy who visited their rooms, and on the night he died, Dorothy showed me a hospital incident report. All the patients in the pediatric ward woke up at the same time, screaming about the boy who won't leave. It was 3 hours of complete chaos. When they finally managed to calm everyone down, they found Arthur dead in his bed, but there was something strange. What? He was smiling, and his last words, whispered to a nurse moments before he died, were, "Now I can go back home." I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. Mrs. Carmichael, are you telling me that... I'm telling you that since 1987, every family with children who moved into that house reported the same thing, a presence, an entity. Something that looks like a boy but is no longer human. Dorothy closed the files. Eat, files. Eat. Families never stay more than a few months. The children start having nightmares. Then they start talking to imaginary friends. Then they start disappearing for hours without remembering where they've been. And eventually what? Eventually the parents find their children in the basement. The blood froze in my veins. In the basement doing what? Playing. With Arthur. Rearranging the symbols on the walls. Whispering in languages that small children should not know. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I need to go home. I need to check on Emma. Mrs. Mitchell. Dorothy gently grabbed my arm. There's one more thing you need to know. I didn't want to hear anymore. I had heard too much, but I couldn't pull away. The last family that lived in the house, the Petersons, they left only 2 months ago. In the middle of the night without telling anyone. Why? Because they found their 4-year-old daughter in the basement at 3 in the morning, drawing on the symbols on the walls with her own blood. I ran from the library. During the entire drive home, my mind was racing. Emma talking about Arthur. Emma drawing the tall man with no face. Emma knowing about other children who had lived in our house. And had she mentioned the basement? I tried to remember. No, she hadn't mentioned it. Yet. But it was only a matter of time. I arrived home to find David in the front yard with Emma, helping her plant some flowers we had bought over the weekend. A perfectly normal scene of a happy family settling into their new home. Except for the drawings Emma had made in the garden soil. Strange symbols scratched with a stick. The same symbols I had just seen in the police photographs of Thomas Blackwood's crimes. Emma, my voice came out sharper than I intended. Where did you learn to draw that? David looked at the symbols, then at me. They're just scribbles, Sarah. Kids do that all the time. But Emma looked at me with those big blue eyes and said, Arthur taught me. He said they are special letters that help people stay together forever. That night, after Emma fell asleep, I told David everything. Every detail of what Dorothy had told me, every document I had seen, every disturbing photograph of Thomas Blackwood's crimes. David listened patiently, asking occasional questions, processing the information in his methodical, logical way. Sarah, he said when I finished, that's a lot to process. We need to get out of this house today, tonight. Calm down. Let's think about this rationally. Rationally? David? Our daughter is being influenced by the spirit of a child who helped his father torture and kill other children. Or, as David said carefully, our daughter is reacting to the stress of the move by creating an elaborate fantasy based on residual emotional energy from a tragedy that happened in this house decades ago. Emotional residual energy? Think about it. Emma is a sensitive child. She might be picking up echoes of this house's history. Her mind is processing those sensations through what she knows, stories, imaginary friends. It was a rational explanation, and a part of me desperately wanted to believe it. What about the symbols she drew? Those symbols she may have seen somewhere, maybe even in the basement itself. You said some are still visible on the walls. It was true. When we inspected the house before buying, I noticed some strange marks on the basement walls. Janet had said they were old water damage. David, what if you're wrong? What if there really is something supernatural going on here? He pulled me close. Then we'll deal with it, together. But for now, let's give it a few days. Let's watch Emma carefully, document anything strange, and if things get worse. Yes? Then we'll leave. I promise, I agreed reluctantly. But that night, I installed security cameras throughout the house. If something was happening to Emma, I would get proof. The next 3 nights were quiet. Emma slept through the night, with no nightmares or sleepwalking. She didn't mention Arthur, nor did she draw strange symbols. David started suggesting that maybe talking to me had broken the spell. I wanted to believe him. Then came the 5th night. I woke up at 2:17 a.m. to the sound of one of the security camera alarms. My phone showed movement detected in the basement. David was still sound asleep. I slid out of bed and opened the camera app on my phone. The image was grainy, black and white, but clear enough to see Emma walking down the basement stairs, alone, in slow motion, as if she were walking underwater. I rushed to her room. The bed was empty. I ran downstairs in a panic, David waking up with the noise and following me. We reached the basement door and I opened it. Emma was down there, standing in the center of the space, surrounded by something. They weren't exactly people. They were shapes. Semi-transparent shadows moving around her in a slow circle. And in the center, more solid than the others, was a figure I recognized from Emma's descriptions, Arthur Blackwood. But this was no longer the 8-year-old boy who had died in the psychiatric hospital. This thing had grown, transformed into something much worse, impossibly tall, with limbs that stretched beyond normal human proportions, faceless exactly as Emma had described, but where the face should be there was only a void that seemed to suck light from the environment. Emma was talking to him. I couldn't hear the words, but her voice was different, deeper, more mature, as if it wasn't Emma speaking anymore, but something speaking through her. "Emma," I screamed. All the figures turned to me at the same time. The movement was so coordinated, so non-human that I stumbled backward. Arthur pointed at me with a finger that seemed to stretch indefinitely. When he spoke, his voice came from everywhere at once, from the walls, the ceiling, the air itself. "She is mine now." Like all the others were mine, the other shadows began to take a more solid form. Children, dozens of them, all between the ages of 4 and 10, all with the same empty eyes and lost expressions, and I recognized some of them from the photographs in the police files. The victims of Thomas Blackwood. "Emma, come here, now." I tried to keep my voice firm, but it came out as a scared whisper. Emma turned to me, but those were no longer her eyes. They were dark, empty eyes like bottomless pits. "I can't, Mommy. Arthur said if I leave, he'll hurt you and Daddy." David appeared beside me, panting. "What the hell?" Arthur laughed. The sound filled the basement, echoing off the walls like in a cathedral. "Daddy too," Arthur said. "What a lovely family. What a complete family." The shadows of the children began to climb the stairs toward us. David pushed me back and slammed the basement door shut, locking it. "Call the police," he said. "And say what?" "That our daughter is being kidnapped by ghosts." From inside the basement, I heard Emma start to cry. But it wasn't her normal crying. It was a high-pitched, inhuman sound like a wounded animal. "We have to do something," I said. David was looking around the kitchen, searching for something, anything that might help. "Holy water," he suddenly said. "Didn't you say some families tried a religious blessing?" "We don't have holy water." "We have this." He grabbed the salt from the cabinet. In horror movies, salt always works, and it was ridiculous. We were trying to save our daughter with table salt, based on Hollywood movies. But we had no other options. David drew a line of salt in front of the basement door. Emma's crying stopped abruptly. Then complete silence. "Emma," I called. "Emma, are you all right?" No answer. David looked at me. "I'm going down." "No, we're not splitting up. We're going together." We opened the door carefully. The basement was dark, but I could see Emma at the bottom of the stairs alone. "Baby, are you okay?" She looked up. Her eyes were normal again, but she looked confused. "Mommy, how did I get down here?" David went down first, checking every corner. The basement was empty except for Emma, but on the walls the ancient symbols were glowing with a faint greenish light. And on the floor where the shadows had been, there were burned footprints on the wood. Dozens of them. Small footprints of children, charred into the floor as if they had been standing in fire. We took Emma upstairs, locked the basement door, and spent the rest of the night awake in the living room, all together on the sofa. "I don't remember coming down," Emma said repeatedly. "I was dreaming about Arthur, and then I woke up down there." The next morning we called Janet Whitmore. "We want to sell the house," I said without preamble. There was a long pause. "You just moved in 2 weeks ago." "We know, but we changed our minds." "May I ask the reason?" "If there are problems with the property, maybe we can—" "There are no problems with the property," David interrupted. "It's a personal decision." Another pause. "I understand. Well, I can put it on the market today, but you will take a significant financial loss, especially considering the closing costs you just paid. We don't care. And where will you live in the meantime?" David and I looked at each other. We hadn't thought about that. "In a hotel," I said. "Temporarily." We packed our bags that morning, just the essentials, some clothes, toiletries, Emma's favorite toys. We left everything else. As we were loading the bags into the car, Mrs. Henderson appeared in her garden. She didn't say anything, just waved. But I could see relief in her expression. And the moment we drove out of the street, I saw a figure in the second-floor window of our house, tall, dark, watching our car drive away. Emma, sitting in the back seat, turned to look out the rear window. "Goodbye, Arthur," she said calmly. "Turned to look out the rear window." "Goodbye, Arthur," she said calmly. "It was fun playing with you." David stepped harder on the accelerator. We spent 3 weeks at the extended stay hotel before finding an apartment to rent in the Boston suburbs. It was smaller than our old house, but it was clean, modern, and most importantly, it had no history. Emma adjusted surprisingly well. She didn't mention Arthur again, nor did she draw strange symbols. Her nightmares stopped completely. It was as if our experience in Cedar Falls had just been a bad dream. But a week after we moved into the apartment, Emma made a drawing during her free time at daycare. Her new teacher showed it to me when I picked her up. It was our old house at 1247 Elm Street. Every detail was perfectly represented. The color, the windows, even the oak tree in the backyard. And in the second-floor window, Emma had drawn a dark figure watching out. "Why did you draw the old house, sweetie?" I asked in the car. "Because Arthur asked me to," she said naturally. "He appeared in my dream last night and said he misses me." My blood ran cold. "Arthur came to your dream?" "Uh-huh. He said your new house is nice, but he can't visit me here. He said he has to stay at his house." "Is there anything else he said?" Emma thought for a moment. "He said he's waiting for a new family to move in, but he hopes they have younger kids than me. He said 3-year-olds are better than 4-year-olds. "Why?" "Because they believe easier." That night I searched online for our old house. Janet had put it back on the market as promised. But the price had dropped again. It was now $45,000 below market value. And there was a new family interested. The Wilsons, with 2-year-old twins. I tried calling Janet, but she didn't return my calls. I tried contacting the Wilsons directly, but couldn't find contact information. Then, 3 days later, I saw an article in the local Cedar Falls newspaper. New family moves into historic Elm Street property. The photograph showed a happy young couple posing on the front porch with 2 identical blonde little girls. The headline said the Wilsons were excited to start a new life in the charming historic town of Cedar Falls. I cut out the article and put it in my diary. Along with Emma's drawings, the photographs from the police files and all the other reminders of our experience, because I knew it wasn't over. Arthur Blackwood was patiently waiting in the house at 1247 Elm Street, as he had always waited, waiting for the next innocent family, the next child to add to his collection. And he had all of eternity. 2 weeks later, Emma woke up in the middle of the night screaming, "Mommy, the twin little girls! Arthur is hurting the twin little girls." I called the Cedar Falls police the next day, but they said they couldn't investigate dream reports. I tried to explain about the house's history, but the officer who answered the phone said that property-related issues should be directed to the housing department. Then, on Friday, I saw another newspaper article. Family mysteriously disappears from Cedar Falls. The Wilsons had disappeared from their house in the middle of the night, leaving all their possessions behind. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence of violent crime. They simply left. But there was one detail the article mentioned that made me feel sick. The twins had been found walking on the road 5 kilometers from town at 6 in the morning, still in their pajamas. They were physically unharmed, but couldn't or wouldn't explain where their parents were. And when social workers asked where they had been during the night, they both gave the same answer, playing in the basement with Arthur and the other children. The twins were placed in temporary foster care while the search for their parents continued. But, as far as I know, the Wilsons were never found, and the house at 1247 Elm Street was back on the market again. This time, the price dropped to $60,000 below market value. I know I should let it go. Move on with our new life. Forget Cedar Falls and Arthur Blackwood and everything that happened in that terrible house. But I can't, because I know it's only a matter of time before another family finds that incredible bargain on the housing market. Another young family looking to start a new life, create memories, build a future. And Arthur will be waiting, so I keep a Google alert for 1247 Elm Street, Cedar Falls. And every time a new family moves in, I try to warn them. I send anonymous emails, letters, even phone calls. Most ignore me. They think I'm some crazy neighbor or a real estate competitor trying to sabotage the sale. But some listen. Some ask questions. Investigate the house's history, discover the truth about Thomas and Arthur Blackwood. And those manage to escape in time, the others. Well, Emma still has dreams about them sometimes. Dreams about children playing in the basement, drawing symbols on the walls, whispering in old languages while Arthur watches with approval. She tells me about every new child who joins Arthur's family. their names, their ages, what they were like when they first arrived at the house, and it always ends with the same question. Mommy, why won't Arthur let the children go home? I never know what to answer, because the truth is that Arthur Blackwood is no longer a child. Maybe he started as one, an innocent victim of his father's sick impulses. But years of trauma, conditioning, and exposure to pure evil transformed him into something different. Something that feeds on the innocence of other children. Something that collects souls like toys. And as long as that house remains standing, as long as people keep moving in without knowing its history, Arthur will continue to grow stronger. One child at a time, one family at a time, one soul at a time. This is my story. This is my warning. If you ever see a property that seems too good to be true, especially an old house with a history of multiple short-term owners, do your research, talk to neighbors, investigate local records, and if your children start talking about new imaginary friends who know things they shouldn't know, if they start drawing strange symbols or waking up in places where they shouldn't be, don't wait to find out what's happening. Just leave. Take your children and leave. Because some places are more than just houses. Some places are traps. And once the hunter sets eyes on your family, it may be too late to escape. Arthur is always waiting, and he has all of eternity to be patient. Don't be the next family in his collection. Don't let your children become part of his eternal game. Because when Arthur Blackwood decides a child is special, he will do anything to keep them forever, even if it means destroying everything and everyone they love. This is my testimony. This is my truth. And if you don't believe me, maybe you should ask the other 17 families who tried to make 1247 Elm Street their home, if you can find them. Because most were never seen again after their last night in that house. Most simply disappeared, as if they had never existed, as if Arthur had erased not just their lives, but their very existence from reality, leaving only echoes, only whispers, only warnings that no one wants to hear. Until it's too late, until it's your turn, until it's your child he wants to add to his collection. So please listen to my story. And if you see a house that looks perfect, that is being sold for a price that seems too good to be true, that has a history of owners who never stay long, keep driving. Find another place to call home, because some places should never be inhabited again. Some places should be left empty, forever. And the house at 1247 Elm Street, Cedar Falls, Massachusetts, is definitely one of those places. Arthur is waiting there now, at this very moment, planning how to lure his next family, his next child, his next toy. Don't let it be yours. Please don't let it be yours. If this story left you with chills thinking about all the houses you visited when looking for a new home, leave a comment telling about your own experiences. Have you ever felt something strange in a property? Have you heard stories about houses with reputations in your towns? Share your stories. Maybe together we can keep other families safe. And if you know someone who is looking for a house, especially in small towns with historical properties, maybe you should share this story with them. Because knowledge is the best protection against predators like Arthur Blackwood. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more horror stories based on real experiences. Because unfortunately, evil doesn't only exist in horror movies. It exists in real houses, in real towns, waiting for real families. Families like yours. Stay safe, do your research, and trust your instincts. Because sometimes they can save your lives, and the lives of your children. Your lives, and the lives of your children.